live now. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Today is September 23rd. This is the Daniel Smith and Pascal Henens show. The Threat Researchers Live, episode number 14. And today again, as always, I think we have a action-packed episode for you. So what are we gonna talk about today? First of all, we're gonna discuss the return of REvil, however we pronounce it. Then we're gonna talk about ransom denial of service. There's been a lot going on the last couple of weeks around ransom and around denial of service attacks, and some people were quite heavily impacted recently. So we're gonna go through what we saw, what we found, what we know, what we don't know. Then we're gonna talk about the new RDoS campaign, which is using the moniker REvil, as Daniel already predicted. They're gonna start using it. We saw it with DarkSide, but now it's REvil. And then we're gonna talk about a new botnet that's been harassing some people. One of the bigger attacks that we saw, the Mēris Botnet. We're also going to talk about LockBit, who's reaching out for Meris, or for the operator behind Meris better. DDoS-for-Hire sentencing, Dark.IoT updates, because of some new vulnerabilities that were disclosed very recently. So OMIGOD, or OMIGOD, as the researchers from Wiz were saying when they discovered that vulnerability. But since it's in the OMI agent, they dubbed it OMIGOD. UDP Technology, supply chain vulnerabilities, and then more vulnerabilities on the horizon. So it's quite a lot to go through. So I hope you're comfortable, and let's kick it off. So Daniel.
Yeah. So I guess we'll start off with a REvil. I like to pronounce it REvil, but I think it's REvil, or I don't know. It's a fun one to pronounce all these different group names. But anyways, the group was very famous. I think a lot of people know who this ransomware group is. It made tons of media attention, but they went on a hiatus. It was about a 2-month hiatus. They disappeared in July 13th, and they had been launching a series of ransomware attacks that gained national and actually global attention with the JBS attack and also the Casilla attack. I don't know if a lot of people are familiar with that, but basically what happened with the last one, the Casilla attack, is that an affiliate or someone inside the group had dropped a payload into Casilla, which was basically a supply chain hack, and then it went down to, I forget exactly how many people it impacted, but it impacted about 100 different businesses or so. And this came at a really volatile time. At the point we were being attacked, the United States, have been attacked by several Russian-based ransomware groups, which had prompted a call between Biden and Trump. I'm sorry, Biden and Putin.
Yeah, the Biden-Trump call was a little bit before that, no?
Yeah. So it's the same thing, right? Biden, Trump, or Putin, Trump. My bad. I get all the world leaders mixed up. But anyways, Biden and Putin had a call on July 12th about the actual Casilla hack, and Biden basically gave him an ultimatum saying that everything needed to stop and he needed to work on the groups within the side of his country. And then the next day, REvil disappeared. A lot of people speculated that this was law enforcement action, or that this was possibly just a rebranding. A lot of ransomware groups like to disappear once they gain too much attention. They will rebrand and then will come back out as another name. We've seen this a few times with a couple other groups, but what ended up happening is on September 7th, all the REvil infrastructure came back online. And by infrastructure, I mean like their payment sites, their main darknet site where they host all their PR information. The original contact came back online, which led a lot of people to wonder like what exactly had happened. Most of the stuff is going to be burnt and taken down. in this process. And so a lot of people start looking online, and they start looking around to see what the operators might be saying, or if unknown, their PR spokesperson was still around to see what they had to say. And this is what ended up happening, is that REvil's operators came back with their own account on exploit.in, which is a known criminal forum. And they talked about the disappearance of one of their PR agents unknown. And at the same time about how their servers had been compromised, and basically how they decided to go on a break. They thought there was a lot of attention coming, and they thought they were going to be arrested. And so naturally they went away. But when the tension died down and the heat died down, they decided to come back, and they have come back as REvil. We know that they are back because their PR site has been updated with new victims and new victim data. So they're definitely back out and swinging. But it was very interesting, because a lot of people don't know exactly what happened. There's a lot of different conflicting stories out there about where they are, what they've been doing, or why they might have disappeared. But on our next slide, it's kind of a fun little thing here. I forget what research company it was, but Bleeping Computers had covered it. And basically what it is it's a chat between the operator and a security researcher, where the operator is basically asking, or the operator is telling the group, basically, you need to take a break. This is a huge issue that we deal with even in the InfoSec industry as white hat researchers, right? Burnout is a very real thing, and even criminals need to kind of step away from the plate sometimes and take a little break and come back. So it's very interesting to see this whole REvil situation happen. I don't think a lot of us thought they were going to come back as REvil, but they have. And it has a lot of us concerned about what's going to happen as far as the, I won't say cyber war, but cyber conflict between the two countries goes forward as it goes forward.
Well, yeah, the Suex exchange was taken offline not so long ago. I think it was this month. That's a crypto exchange where they had hundreds of millions of ransomware cryptocurrencies that came through, and they were based in Czech Republic, if I'm not mistaken. However, the only branches were listed in Moscow and St. Petersburg. So that might be one thing that's related to it. So start at the exchanges, take away their way to clean their money, to launder the money.
You bring up a really interesting point. With all these the sanctions coming down, it's going to make it very difficult to pay these criminals, right? I'm not advocating that victims should pay ransomware groups, but in the event that they don't have backups and this is their only option, it kind of puts people in the wrong position. I truly believe all these.
Yeah, there were a lot of people who were in a bad position after REvil went dark. Luckily, somebody came back with the leaked key, but.
Well, and that's the interesting part that we talked about in the previous slide there, where someone on an exploit had talked about how law enforcement might have gotten that key during the key generation phase of that. But yeah,
there's different stories about that key. Some said it was leaked by one of the operators. The other story is it was stolen. It was found. It was well, let's say that it came.
Yeah, it showed up unannounced. But yeah, it's the interesting thing about sanctions is I think that it punishes both the victim and the operator. I get laws, I get sanctions why we can't pay these people, but at the same time, if a company goes down, they're losing millions of dollars and they have no way to get that decryption key back because of sanctions, we're now officially becoming the bad guy to a company as well. So
yeah,
I think
it's
we
a
need to
hard
look at
one.
other options. Yeah, and a lot of people always say, like, if we were to take away cryptocurrency, the criminals will still find another way to take payments.
Of course,
so
they did before, didn't they?
Yeah.
That brings us to what happened before on everything that's DDoS extortion or ransom denial of service.
Yeah. This has been going on for quite a while, since 2014 with DD4BC, which stood for
no crypto back then, no?
There was crypto back then, yeah.
Yeah, was it? Okay.
Yeah. They were asking for was it $5,000 to $6,000 in Bitcoin. Because the famous attack was Proton Mail 2015, where there was $6,000 they asked for, and that was a really interesting part, right? Like, so back when DD4BC and Armada Collective, the real ones, were going around, they had a reputation. They need to uphold it. And this really weird situation happened where Proton Mail went under extortion by Armada Collective. Proton Mail chose to make the payment, and another group attacked Proton Mail. And so Armada Collective, fearing their reputation, actually sent the money back, which is a real weird thing, but they sent the money back to try to uphold their reputation. And I think a lot of people are familiar with the case. We don't really have to dive too deep into it, but it was a very interesting situation as far as RDoS goes. Now, following that event, this event gained so much attention globally that the blood was in the water, and so a lot of groups decided to start mimicking these tactics and techniques. And so we had this long list of groups that we had seen since 2015, 2014, Red Door, EasyBTC. You even had a group claiming to be Lizard Squad. It wasn't really Lizard Squad, and that's what kind of started with the fakes, right? And so we started learning and talking about fake groups leveraging names. So we had Fancy Bear, which is ep.14, a Russian nation state group. You had Lazarus, which is a North Korean nation state group. Then you had the combination of Fancy Lazarus, like that was the weirdest one. And then most recently, we have a group going around claiming that they're DarkSide and REvil.
Talking about the dark
side.
The
interesting. Yeah. So like back in June, we had originally talked about this. I alerted that we were going to soon see RDoS groups leveraging ransomware names. And so what we had seen back then is we saw a group going around claiming that they were DarkSide. Now, just to give a little bit of background, DarkSide had just disappeared. They had just gone off the map when this had happened. So someone was leveraging a name of a group that was recently defunct, and they started to target the energy and food sector. Now, the interesting thing is that their claim for RDoS attack was 100 Bitcoin, which is like $4.5 million. This is a big change from like $5,000 or $6,000 now to 4.5 million. And a lot of these groups, the fake groups, they don't have a lot of the power. They don't have a lot of the fear to instill into their victims, so they have to use other people's names. And this was just a really small section, right? We only saw this pop up once. I think it was Trend Micro that had reported about it. But after that, it kind of disappeared until recently, when we saw an REvil RDoS campaign. This is where things get a little weird, right? So there is a group right now leveraging the REvil name to intimidate their victims, and they're sending out RDoS campaign. They're running an RDoS campaign, so they're sending out a letter.
The timing was also like compared to DarkSide. This group came up like the day before REvil surfaced again. So REvil was out and gone, just like DarkSide, and then all of a sudden this RDoS campaign with REvil comes up. And then everybody, of course, we knew, hey, REvil is gone, so it cannot be. But then day after REvil surfaced, we were still pretty sure that this is not in their tactics, but still.
It was really confusing when it came out, right? Because, as a company, you only can see the attacks of the clients you protect. And so, a lot of times in external research, we're looking at other events that are happening out there. And, you see news clips and you hear people say like, oh, REvil's launched a colossal, like, what was the word, colossal, ransom, RDoS attack against these VoIPs in the UK.
No, it was a colossal ransom demand. The attack was not really specified, but it was the demand that was...
I think you could say that the attack was specified because they actually went offline for quite a while. Like that's the interesting thing. I'm trying to make a point between the DarkSide and the REvil situation is that when the DarkSide fake RDoS campaign ran, there wasn't any noticeable outage. But right now, what we're seeing with REvil is we're seeing some of the old tactics and techniques from the Armada Collective and DD4BC, where this group, we think that as one group, is targeting the same vertical, and they're only targeting a handful of people in vertical. Now, what's really interesting is they start with 1 Bitcoin, which is about $45,000, but they quickly escalate to 100 Bitcoin, which is insane, right? So like you kind of have to sit there and have to say that this group might not be legitimate because they're asking for $4 million. When you look at the price of mitigation versus the price of extortion, there's clearly a difference there. But one thing we can say is that we can confirm that the REvil campaign impacted VoIP.ms. There's also conversation about VoIP Unlimited and VoIP Phone in the UK.
It started with the UK. So the first messages that we saw were VoIP Unlimited and VoIP Phone, and now recently it was VoIP.ms that's located in Canada, and they have been suffering since September 16, right? It was.
Yeah, it's still ongoing as of yesterday.
Yeah.
Pretty long campaign. That's typical of the old DD4 and Armada collective. And so here's the actual extortion letter that the RDoS group REvil is sending around at the moment. We like to show these every now and then just to let people get an idea.
If we can find them, because that was a hard one, right?
Yeah. This one was actually really, really hard. You know, the group had posted this letter on Pastebin and started adding victims on Twitter, which was really weird. You know, people are sitting there saying, hey, my service is down, and this group was tweeting at them saying, hey, this is why, and they're not paying our ransom. This group even went as far as to suggest the victims could pay money to their Bitcoin wallet to stop the DDoS attack, which was very, very weird. I mean, a lot of these TTPs don't match up with the prior groups, but they're definitely out there. And I would say,
yeah, it's here that the Twitter message is, we made an initial offer. Does it say? Because many people were complaining, hey, well, they were actually divided. You had some customers who stand behind VoIP.ms that said, yeah, we need to be hard, we cannot pay. And then you had the others, hey, my business is severely impacted by this, you should pay. And then REvil started to sending quite a lot of tweets. It's a long Twitter thing that was going on.
The one thing I will mention is the only other RDoS group that we've ever seen use a Twitter handle to intimidate their victims was EZBTC. It was a group back, I think, in 2015, 2016 that we had alerted on, where they were using a Twitter handle to intimidate victims, which is kind of something interesting. You know, you have a group that's claiming to be REvil, and right now the big thing in ransomware is double and triple extortion. So you kind of have to sit there and wonder, are the RDoS groups learning from ransomware groups, or are they working together? And we might get into that later.
So I took out these parts of the tweets because they were quite interesting, because that's how it all started. So you see on September 16, it started with the DNS servers being under attack, which is the same tactic as was used for the Fancy Lazarus campaign. I don't know if you remember. They were identifying people who didn't have DDoS protection on their DNS, and they started taking out their DNS services, and they hit quite a few ISPs back in the time. Well, back in the time, it's like, what, it's two months ago. It's not that long ago. Yeah, it has been a continuous event. Everything that's ransom, we said it at the beginning of the year. We believe that ransom DDoS will be a persistent threat added to the DDoS threat landscape. And it has been all year long. We have heard about ransom and ransom from different areas. So it started last year, and in August last year, we believe it's a different group that was operating at that moment. So when it started in August, and in December, we saw them coming back to the same victims. So circling back and sending the victims there already send a letter with the same Bitcoin address, which is proof that it was the same actor that was behind those two campaigns in August and end of December, early January, because they knew which victims were targeted. They had the Bitcoin addresses of those victims, and those letters were never leaked, and that information was never leaked online. So they had no idea, or better, if you're not the operator, you could not have an idea which customers of ours have been threatened before. And they got letters with new threats. Hey, we're back, we're threatening you. And then came that Fancy Lazarus, and he was, what we saw is that not really going after our customers that were already protected by us, but many new ISPs, new cloud service providers. It started out in Norway, Nordics, and then went to the UK, Ireland, and then it went international. And now here again, you have REvil starting out in the UK with VoIP services, and then now Canada, annoying Canada. And the first thing that they did, VoIP.ms, was say, hey, look, here are the IP addresses for DNS. So that's one solution. If your DNS is down, well, let people connect to the IP address, which would be okay for businesses that provide a service. They can put it in their local host files, I guess. I also believe that they went under protection of Cloudflare, but that was not really successful until now. I don't know to what extent and what they exactly put under there, but once the DNS was kind of resolved by giving people manual IPs, the attackers just went after the VoIP service itself. So the lost campaign, or better, the lost attacks were on the VoIP service itself, and as far as we know, it's still ongoing right now.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that, you know, whoever's behind these groups, they are evolving and they are learning, and that is something to be of concern, is that they're learning these techniques and they're learning how to have a bigger impact. You know, I don't think we can go so far to say that the events in New Zealand are ransom based, but if you look at a lot of the DDoS attacks that have happened this month,
talk about opening a can of worms. The events in New Zealand, yeah.
More or less, I'm getting to the point, you know, for the next slide too, that the attacks are getting bigger. They're getting more sophisticated, and there is a growing problem with DDoS. For a long time, people thought that DDoS had kind of tapered out and that there was nothing left on the table. And as we've learned in the last like 30 to 60 days, there's actually a massive hand cannon out there. There's a very large botnet. There's all kinds of new techniques that the RDoS groups are using, and we're seeing that as far as service degradations and outages across the internet.
Yeah, New Zealand has been having trouble. Kiwi Bank, it was, I believe, that was one of the names that came up a lot.
You know you're in trouble if you're tweeting 2 weeks later that you're going to have internet outages that day, like in advance. Like that, yeah. They were very prepared, and they knew that the attacks were coming. So you know, it kind of makes me wonder if it was an RDoS campaign.
A ransom, yeah. Yeah, which brings us to another one.
Hand cannons.
Yeah. Well, we actually in the last episode we talked about the new record DDoS in number of requests per second. You know, you have all these different categories in the DDoS Olympics. You have the volume, the biggest volume. You have the fastest one with the most packets per second, and you also have the one where they do the trifecta of requests per seconds. So yeah, we covered this Cloudflare one. That was 17.2 million requests per second, and where they said it was more than 20,000 bots. They also laid out which countries they originated from, but everybody forgot about that until earlier this month. Yandex came out with a report that they suffered an even bigger attack. So in number of requests per second, we're up to 21.8 million requests per second, and that was on September 5. Now they started looking into it, and they jumped a little bit to conclusions that it was a botnet, in my opinion. But there are some interesting things that are notable and that we can call facts, which is, first of all, they found 65,000 devices. So no, different IP addresses, not gonna say devices. They estimate the botnet at over 200,000 bots, but I'm not sure how they come up with that number. They also were saying that the command and control was using L2TP, which seems rather strange as well for a botnet, especially if it's 200,000 bots. I think that the bot herder needs quite a big VPN concentrator to be able to talk with 200,000 L2TP bots or endpoints. So I don't think that they would do that. However, what they did find out is that all of the a lot of those devices, I said all with a question mark because they did not really say all. They said they tested some, had port 2000 and 5678 open, and 2000 is a bandwidth tester port for MikroTik router OS. So that is fairly unique for MikroTik routers. Now, if you go scan the internet, they scanned the internet for port 2000 and 5678. They found about 350,000 devices. Now, in newer versions of router OS, they're not using port 5678 anymore. They use two newer ports for management. So if you just look at port 2000, which is the best indicator for MikroTik, you will find that there's about 3.5 million devices out there. If that would be a bot that is infecting and going around, I think we should have seen it. We should probably picked it up somewhere while it was infecting. We saw that there was an increase in trying to scan for the port 5678, but not an alarming increase, as compared to what we saw with Mozy at some point. And then, yeah, the attacks were full requests, so HTTP requests, and they were using a technique called HTTP pipelining, according to Yandex, which is an older technique that's was used in HTTP 1.1 to just reuse the connection and be able to have several connections go at the same time, like queuing them up. Which can affect server, especially when you're doing an attack with number of requests per second. And then, like a couple of days later, there was Krebs on security that published an article that they also got hit. So yeah, if you name a bot like Mirai, of course Krebs needs to be involved, because yeah, he was one of the alphas that was hit by the Mirai attack. Then it was Krebs OVH, and then afterwards it was Dyn that happened. So. And that was more than 2 million requests per second. Yeah, it's not at the scale of a cloud provider. Krebs on Security's website is not hosted by a cloud provider, but Yandex, Cloudflare both have the same size as a cloud provider. So it's yeah, it's pretty big attacks. Now, moving to the attack pattern, and yeah, that was kind of a funny one for me, because for me, Meris is like gone in 60 seconds. So the Yandex,
very quick attack.
Yeah, so it's an attack that ramps up to 22 million requests per second, or a little less than 22 million requests per second, in a fraction of a second. And the attack does not last longer than 60 seconds, and it's gone. It's completely gone. So it's like, yeah, I don't know. It's really hard to imagine how an attack can build up so fast and then cool down as fast as it did. And also that brings the other question: what's the objective behind that? Is it a warning shot? Was it a mistake? Is it a test? Is it? We're not sure yet where to put that one.
It's very weird. I mean, it's like, as you said, it's a concentrated burst. It's
or is it an advertisement?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because after this attack was launched, we saw once again on this was exploit.is.
XX.
Yeah. The exploit XSS website. Anyways, LockBit is a famous ransomware operator. They have an account on this site in the forum, and right after the attack, someone on the forum had started talking about the Mēris Botnet. They weren't talking about it from a criminal perspective. They were just re-reporting the news that we talk about in the InfoSec industry. Anyways, the operators are asking for the botnet owner to contact them. They would like to hire the botnet owner. Now, a lot of people would ask, why would a ransomware group want to hire an RDoS group? Well, it's because of triple extortion. Triple extortion is one of the newer techniques that these ransomware groups are leveraging. At the beginning, they just encrypted your files and asked for payment. And then they actually exported. They removed that data. They encrypted, removed the data, and then asked you to make a payment. Now, if you have backups and you don't want to talk with the operators and you don't care, they will launch a DDoS attack against you or some of your clients as a way to bring you back to the table. And so that's one of the reasons why operators out there would be looking for the Meris bot herder.
Which brings us to another objective of DDoS.
Yeah, this was an interesting one. I just kind of want to throw it in, something that we've been talking about for quite a while now. These two gentlemen were arrested in 2018 for running a series of stressors. So DownThem and Ampnode, they had 2,000 customers. They launched over 200,000 attacks. This takedown was part of the larger FBI takedown. It was 15 services that were taken down in 2018. It was a pretty good cleanup job by the FBI, but as we've talked about in prior videos here, that over the pandemic, we saw a number of booters and stressors come back online. So it's kind of a problem in general, but anyways, they were both found guilty just the other day. Right now, they're looking at sentencing in January and December. So it'll be a little interesting to see what happens, but one of them is facing 35 years in prison. I doubt they'll get 35 years, but the other one's looking at 10. So it'll be really interesting to see how much time these two operators get for running a DDoS stressor service.
Yeah, well, we already had the VDoS arrest. How much did they did they get? Do you remember?
Well, VDoS, I think at the time they were arrested was like $1.2 million that they had made, but
well, yeah,
Apple
they
Applejack didn't
estimated
go to
based on the logs, the logs that were not deleted, at least.
yeah. Yeah, so like the weird thing that happened with Applejack Yerenbrini, or I forget how his last name is pronounced. He was an Israeli citizen, so he was picked up on his 18th birthday, and he was escorted to the IDF. I don't think he actually served any prison time. He's, I believe, working with the government now. I'm not sure, but you know, he actually didn't serve any time.
Well, he's serving his time now.
Yeah. I mean,
working for free.
Yeah. Well, a lot of these bot herders, they really don't see too much time. A lot of it's time served through the trial. A lot of times they're also serving up and snitching on other people, so they get a reduction in prison time. It's more or less when they get out of jail and they become a repeat offender. You know, a lot of times they'll get slapped on the wrist for the first time, but you know, if they mess around again online, they will be looking at maximum mandatory sentences.
Yeah, it's a hard one because they actually did not perform the attacks.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing
to the attack. Yeah,
it's the same thing about blaming the gun companies for shooting. You know, is it the person that owns the gun or the company that made the gun?
Yeah, typical for Americans. Comparing it with guns.
It's a very common argument that we hear out here, but you know, it still applies, right? Like like you said. Yeah. There's over 2,000 customers that launched 200,000 attacks. So there's a lot of people on that list that did not see justice.
Where are those 2,000? If they know it's 2,000, so they must have some idea who they might be.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen in previous takedowns where I think it was the UK authorities went to go visit a lot of the people that launched stress tests, where they didn't really have too much of a legal ground to arrest them, but you know, just knock, let them know, like, hey, we have your information. We know you did this type of thing. It's a growing problem. You know, and once again, it's the same thing like ransomware. And are we going about dealing it in the right way? You know, we take down a few servers here and there, and you know, 50 of them pop up over the pandemic. So you kind of have to look at a different way of going about it.
Question is also who's using it. So DDoS-for-Hire, mostly the actors that we see grabbing DDoS-for-Hire are the disgruntled employees or unhappy customers who are like, yeah, they're on a gaming website, they're betting their lost dollars and they fail, they lose their money, so they want to hurt that company that took their money. So they go to a DDoS-for-Hire platform to perform that attack. Same for kids who are gaming and they want to get a competitive edge. Well, they go to such a platform. Some of those platforms actually only exist for gaming attacks. And most of the people behind those platforms at the same time, they do have a DDoS protection service. So you can get the service with them. It's a full service. And we have seen that.
I was going to say that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say a more modern example is probably parents using stressor services launch DDoS attacks against schools for mask mandates. You know, it's like it used to be the kids attacking to prevent taking a test. Now it's the parents attacking because they don't want their kids to wear a mask. You know, it's so quickly how it shifts.
Yeah, well, we've seen it in the history. So I was going to say the Paras Jah, so the guy behind Mirai, well, he had his own company in DDoS protection, and Mirai was to attack the platforms of the competition, and that was Minecraft. And then you had the Gen X crew, that was GTA Online. So they had services for GTA Online, and if you hosted a server with them and you wanted your server to be successful, that means you have that server and you try to attract people to play on your server, and people pay to play on your server because your server has specific modules or features or extensions installed. Well, the guys behind Gen X had a special business model where you could also rent a service for DDoSing competing servers, so that your server attracts those people. So we've seen that popping up quite a few times when we went after DDoS botnets, people who were building those botnets, that what was behind was a service based on gaming and also providing other services. So gaming, disgruntled customers, people who have no access or no idea how to perform a DDoS attack, but followed or just went online and searched for how can I do DDoS, and they just fall on one of the Google ads and they go ahead and pay a couple of dollars and perform the attack, and they are successful. Now, I wouldn't say that ransom operators go for these tools. I don't think that the return on investment is big enough for them. And also they need more power. Oh yeah, one side note, what we saw in the attack, there was a recent attack on EDPnet this week, or better, it started last week, which is probably also related to that ransom from REvil, and the attack size there was 250 gigabit per second, which is again in line with the attacks that we saw earlier on in ransom campaigns across the world. So 250 seems to be like the sweet spot these days.
Yeah, and like what you're saying as far as like who can afford and who pays for these things. I think there's something to be said about ransomware groups like LockBit looking for Meris, because these groups, I mean, some of them have made over $100 million. They're very well resourced. They could literally just hire the Meris operators to be solely theirs. And you know, that's another thing is like, okay, so if an RDoS group isn't making money and a ransomware group wants to hire them as, you know, as an employee of their service, that's guaranteed money in their pocket. So
yeah, you have the Hacker-for-Hire, which is like the premium level, and then DDoS-for-Hire, which is more like the mass market.
Yeah, the guys who go break your kneecaps.
Yeah. Okay, that's again coming from an American, right?
You want to hear more from an American?
Get your teeth in Dark.IoT.
Yeah. So yeah, Dark.IoT. I think we covered this in our last little video, but we kind of want to have an update here because there's some things have changed. Basically, Dark.IoT is a Mēris variant botnet that we named. The structure of their malware, their binaries, is dark.architecture. So dark.arm7, dark.arm5, whatever it is. Mainly because it was attacking IoT devices, but I think we have a little bit of a curveball here with their new exploits. Dark.cloud, it's a new variant. Anyways, the botnet's been in development since February 2021. It's something that we've reported about before, and a couple other groups out there, part of the Cyber Threat Alliance, have reported as well. The botnet is strictly DDoS, so it's got 13 DDoS vectors in it. And it's been using tons of exploits to propagate over the last few months. Most recently, in the last month, it added 2 new exploits. It added the OMIGOD vulnerability that we had previously talked about, and also added the UDP Technology Vulnerability. Now, this is a little weird curveball to naming. It's not a UDP vulnerability. Yeah. There's a company called UDP Technology that makes firmware for IP cameras that has a vulnerability in it. Very, very confusing when you read it.
The first time I read this, I thought like, oh wait, the vulnerability is over UDP, but that doesn't make sense.
I think that's why a lot of people have skipped over it too. Is you just kind of reading like it doesn't sound right, it doesn't put together, but it is a legitimate vulnerability in firmware for IP cameras. But the interesting thing about Dark.IoT Update is it's updated shell script. So like we had previously talked about, there's a lot of kill functions and different defense evasion techniques that it had. A lot of those have been removed. One thing that was added was the IP firewall port drop.
Yeah, well, that they removed the bot killer makes sense because they are based on Mirai, and Mirai already has bot killing on board, and even much better bot killer than they were doing. They were just doing kill all with famous names of bots. But hey, everybody knows that bots change names. It's easy to change the name of the process that's running. And Mirai has actually quite an extensive, I'm planning on writing a blog about that because I wrote already about that before. But Mirai's bot killer works on several levels. First of all, it goes and looks in the process table for known processes. If that finds it, it will kill it. Secondly, it will search for who is using specific ports. So it will look at port 22 and it will see who owns the socket that's open on port 22, and he will kill that. Sometimes it's the SSH daemon, which is okay because he wants to take over port 22 and block it with a fake service. Just, well, not a fake service, but a sinkhole, just to make sure that nobody else can infect the device. So it's like killing and defense at the same time. And then another way that Mirai was using is scanning for all processes, look at the executable file name, and then look at the file name in storage. And if the file name is not there, you know what bots do when they start? First thing they do, they start up and then they remove the file. It still runs because the blocks are still allocated, but there's no entry in the file table of the file system. So what Mirai does is just scanning for those that are running, but that don't have a backing executable file on storage, and then it kills them. So it's actually quite more sophisticated than just the list of kill all that they put in their script. So I think it's a good thing that they got rid about on that. And another thing that we saw is that they try to do persistence in their shell script. You leveraging cron, they now move that as well in the binary, which makes it more flexible for them. Now they can adapt their shell script depending on the exploit, because every exploit is a little bit different and needs a different approach. So your shell script should probably be adapted depending on the platform and which exploit you're using. So they have more flexibility in that way. So I think, yeah, it's an obvious change. So OMIGOD. I call it OMIGOD just to make the difference with oh my god, because everybody I know Americans say oh my god, but this it's from, well, so it actually comes from oh my god, because when you read the blog of Wiz research team, they wrote in that blog when they found out what the vulnerability was in the Open Management Infrastructure Agent, which is the OMI agent, then they saw that they had a really strange behavior there, and they said, "Oh my god!" So that's how they came up with the name OMIGOD, or OMIGOD.
I'm glad they don't curse like a sailor like I do, because it would have been named Holy.
Yeah, we're gonna cut that one out. Otherwise,
I didn't say it. Self-censor there.
Yeah. Good stuff. The video will stay on YouTube for a little while more. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We won't get banned. Don't worry.
No, I like very much their animation. So I stole their animation because it really explains well how it works. So what they found out is that, so OMI is one of those management agents that you put on a Linux server, and through a web interface, through HTTP, but also through API commands over HTTP, by doing posts with SOAP envelopes, you can send status requests, you can send operations and command to a remote server. Now, what they found out is when you send a request to execute a command on a Linux server, and that's by doing a post to wsman URL, by doing a post, when you put in a basic authentication of an authenticated user, it will, or whether with a valid user, credentials of a valid user in the authorization field, then it will execute as that user. If you put no password in the authorization agent header, then it will fail. If you remove the authorization agent header completely, it will execute the command as root. So that is quite a massive problem. Yeah. That means that you can execute any command on a remote server that has that port exposed and run as root. So, and the thing is, this agent gets installed on a lot of Linux VMs that are running in the Azure cloud, because Microsoft uses this Open Management Infrastructure Agent for certain services in their automation in their Azure cloud. So that means that it gets installed without sometimes even get it updated. So new machines now get the new version of the agent that has been patched. Older machines, some have to be updated manually, so they're not all already included. And we're already a week out, so it was on September 14th that it was disclosed. Now the thing about this is that Dark.IoT, only a couple of hours after disclosure, he was already exploiting it. Yeah, now I'm.
But this is common. this is very common for these operators because, since February, we have seen this group leverage exploits within days and hours of disclosure. These are some, I wouldn't say sophisticated, but they are sitting around. They have a lot of time on their hands, and they're watching and researching just like everybody else, which is something to note.
Yeah, absolutely. But what surprised me the most here, because most of them are like, well, not like, but most of them are not that sophisticated that they go and research themselves or spend their time at researching what the exploit really is. They wait for a proof of concept to be published, right?
Yeah.
So, and yeah, on September 14, the Wiz blog, there's two blogs there. There's one short version, but there's a long technical version, and that includes the actual payload. So you see the payload here on the bottom left. So the actual payload is included there. So it would be easy to just copy paste that payload. But in that payload, in that example, you can see in the bottom that you have p command. So you can see here, if you follow my arrow, you have p command here, and in the blog that talks about it, the command is the real clear text command. Here you see that it's a base64 encoded string. Now, in the actual explanation, it was the command ID, just to show that it returns, oh, I'm root, right? ID, when you do the ID command on the Linux prompt, you will see that you are user ID 0, group ID 0, which is root. In this case, the guys actually found out that you can use an extra parameter in this execute shell command, which is b64 encoded equal true. So they pass b64 encoded true, and then they can base64 encode their request. Now you would say, why would they do that? Well, imagine that you have a Linux server that's managed remotely, and you want to protect against this exploit. What would you do? Well, you're going to search for the p command tag in a signature. So when it passes through your IDP or deep inspection device, you look for the p command tag, and you look if there's a command there. If there is a command, and that command looks like wget or rm, or it looks like any shell command, you can already drop that packet and say, hey, this is a potential command injection. But here they obfuscate it. So even though that they use well-known IPs, so like HTTP, so the 212.192.24172, it's a well-known IP that Dark.IoT has been using for quite some time. And also now it's called the microlol. Used to be lolol.shell, but this one is specifically microlol. That's one of the changes that Daniel already said that they made. They have several scripts now. So even though that you are searching for this microlol or this IP address, you will not find it in the payload because now they base64 encoded it. So I have to, my hat off to those operators. They're a little bit more skilled than I supposed. I always look at those operators as being skids and just waiting until the POC is there and then copying the POC. But here we saw that, hey, wait a minute, this is base64 encoded. Will this work? And then we saw that, oh, hey, there's an extra new field there, b64 encoded. And we went to look in the source code because OMI is open source. And there is indeed a parameter that was added for b64 encoded. So it does work. But it was not in the proof of concept. So those guys were a little bit smarter than the proof of concept.
And like you mentioned, they leveraged this vulnerability within hours of disclosure.
Yeah, that's...
So they moved very quickly for this one.
I think they actually leveraged it before the first Python POC came out, because the first POC was just in the blog and that was the payload. You didn't have the Python script. Sometimes you have to wait until you see the Python script coming out and then you see scanning starting. But we already saw scanning before those Python scripts came on GitHub. So it must have been based on that blog. And these guys actually, well, it's not rocket science either. It's open source. Yeah, you can find it, but they went the extra mile to do it.
Yeah.
Now another, yeah, and slipstreamed with OMIGOD, the one that Daniel already was talking about, the UDP Technology Vulnerability or vulnerabilities disclosed by a French research company, Ransom. It's already out for a while, but I think they just slipstreamed it in while they were going after OMIGOD.
The interesting thing about this. Yeah, the interesting thing about this is it was disclosed on July 8th. A Metasploit module was posted on September 2nd, and it wasn't actually seen inside this binary until I think it was September 25th or something like that.
Yeah.
So a little bit slower on this one, but I think that the more interesting part is how many exploits they are incorporating into Dark.IoT.
Yeah. Does that answer your question?
And then, yeah, so 14 plus actual labeled CVEs. There's several other non-CVE exploits that Dark.IoT is using, but most recently the UDP technology and the Azure OMIGOD vulnerability were just recently added. The ones that are in bold are the exploits that the current payloads are using. The ones that aren't in bold are the exploits that have been removed from the payloads.
But they might still use them central because yeah, there's two ways of doing exploits. You can have a central server that is scanning, and whenever he finds, he will drop or he will send the command that fetches the dropper and the loader, and then it gets infected. Or you can have all your devices scanning, which is distributed scanning, which is much more effective because you cover much more of the internet much faster, and also you have exponential growth. But also you make a lot of noise. So all the honeypots are basically like glowing red because all your bots are starting to try to exploit at the same time. So it can be that they're still using them, but from a central server. So
they're definitely still using them. Last night I noticed they had rolled back to using the Visual Door Sonic Wall SSL VPN exploit. There's no actual CVE for it, so it didn't make the list, but that's another one they're using.
One remark with number 2, it's UDP Technologies, but as the researchers from Randorisec reached out to UDP Technologies with their vulnerabilities, they just ignored them. UDP Technologies never answered them in any way. Now they went to a German IP camera manufacturer that is using firmware from UDP Technologies, which is Göteborg. And I hope I got that right. It has an umlaut on the U, so which is hard to type in our slides. American keyboards. No, QWERTY keyboards in general. It's hard to type. So that's why it's here. It's called UDP Göteborg, but actually it's UDP Technologies. And Göteborg, I don't like mentioning them in the same line as UDP Technologies vulnerabilities because they actually fixed the firmware, they fixed their cameras, they have patches. All the other 16 or more or 60 or more vendors that use UDP technology don't have any fixes. So maybe we should use a name and call them out and say, hey, good job, Göteborg. Now let's just hope that the users find out about it and update their camera, because that's another thing that's never happening.
Updating is definitely a difficult one.
Yeah.
But yeah, on the horizon here, we have a few more vulnerabilities that we want to cover. A little bit of foreshadowing, saying that Dark.IoT might start incorporating these pretty soon. But the first one is the Atlas Confluence vulnerability. This one was just disclosed recently. It's a injection vulnerability in OGNL, and basically it's already being leveraged. We haven't seen it being leveraged by Dark.IoT, but it's being leveraged by the Z0 miner campaign.
Yeah, there is a POC for it. So if you go on GitHub, you will find several POCs. I put a screenshot of one of the POCs there. So if there's a POC, you can be sure that somebody is leveraging it. Oh, and one remark, sorry, Daniel. One remark I forgot to give about the OMIGOD. As Daniel already mentioned, we call this Dark.IoT, but yeah, it's not IoT anymore. OMIGOD is Linux servers running in the Azure cloud. And also I think on-prem Azure, or whatever Linux is using the OMI agent for that matter, because it's open source. So that's not IoT anymore. Those are cloud servers, and very capable cloud servers. Now we already had reports of exploits leveraging OMIGOD or OMIGOD before we reported on Dark.IoT, but those were mostly minors. So most of the exploiters, or the ones that are leveraging that vulnerability are out to get cloud servers and for mining in the cloud, because those are very capable servers. However, Dark.IoT stayed laser focused on their objective, which is DDoS. That's why Daniel said so prominently that the only payload that's in those binaries is 13 DDoS attacks and no crypto miners, nothing else. So they are really out for more and stronger DDoS attacks, and by enslaving cloud servers, I think they are leveraging pretty capable systems. Those systems can hit much harder than a modem on a consumer connection.
Yeah, I mean, as you see, the bar's been raised. So, I mean, of course, they're going to have to look for not only more IoT resources, but they're going to have to start looking for cloud servers. You know, I think any successful botnet going forward is going to have to be a hybrid botnet of IoT devices and cloud services.
Oh yeah, but it's not like it's the first one that goes after cloud servers for DDoS attacks.
Oh, of course not.
But we've seen that most of them were mixed use. They had DDoS payload, and at the same time, their loader script also installed a whole bunch of extra packages on the machine with a crypto miner, XMR miner, or whatever miner that they found. So they just installed it from the shell script and ran it from the shell script, not even from the binary. So those were not loading binaries. But here, the shell scripts were actually made smaller, more smarter, and yeah, I think that they're getting more professional in their campaign.
Yeah. So the other exploit that we're looking at is the Hikvision. This one's kind of interesting because if you follow the beginning of Mirai, this was a very popular device that was incorporated into the original Mirai botnet, but it was disclosed on September 18th. There is no POC yet for it, correct?
No, there is no. I did not find one yet. If there is, it must be recent or one that I did not find.
But it's an unauthenticated RCE, so it's definitely one to watch. And as we said, it's possible that we could see these incorporated into the Dark.IoT botnet in the next few days to weeks here.
Yeah, and concerning the POC, the person who disclosed it said clearly in his blog, because it's too dangerous. It's a CVSS 9.8, same as the Atlassian, same as the next one we're going to talk about. And it's an unauthenticated RCE, so if he publishes the POGs, yeah, then it's game over. Everybody who did not update Hikvision devices will get hacked for sure. But I forgot his name, but look down below in the description. You will find the links to all the resources. And so sorry about the researcher that I forgot your name. But yeah, it was a good disclosure because he did not want to disclose the proof of concept. So really,
we're definitely fans of not posting POCs on GitHub.
Yeah. Now, and another one that dropped, yesterday.
Yeah.
So again, a remote command execution, CVSS score, V3 score of 9.8, so highly critical. And it's VMware vCenter. I would say again, but yeah, I want to make clear that I'm not blaming those people. Every software has vulnerabilities. Okay, there's some that have more than others, but if you open a software or if you expose a software to the world, there's always the risk of vulnerabilities, and it's just a matter of them being found. And there's so many 0 days around us that you don't even know how many vulnerabilities there are in total. So kudos to VMware for finding themselves and publishing themselves this report. And they actually said in their report that the ramifications of this vulnerability are serious. And they also say it's a matter of time, likely minutes after disclosure. So they're even more aggressive than we are, Daniel. Minutes after disclosure that it might be somebody who's working on exploits to get them out. So they are not aware of exploits already. There's no POC. Well, yeah, hey, it dropped yesterday and it came from VMware, not a researcher that's looking for street creds. Because mostly that is what's happening. It's a researcher looking for street cred. Say, hey, look, I can do a POC. Well, don't publish that POC. I've seen a couple of more recent vulnerabilities where they show the POC in YouTube. Okay, do that. Show that POC in YouTube. That's plenty enough for me to see and for me to appreciate what you've done. You don't need to post it in a Python script on GitHub. just make a video of it and don't share the code or how you did it. I prefer not to know, because otherwise everyone starts to leverage it. So in this case, apparently it's a file upload through the HTTP 443, so HTTPS port from vCenter, and I don't know exactly how it works because it was not disclosed. Good thing. But every server that's exposed on this port on the internet can be a victim for this exploit. So if you have VMware vCenter, update as soon as possible. There's also a workaround. So if you cannot update, look at the links below. VMware also issued a workaround for this. So yeah, so enough vulnerabilities on the horizon. Every month we come back and we see that more and more vulnerabilities make it into our episodes. Talking about the good guys, yeah. We wanted to give a shout out to an esteemed friend and colleague, Yaniv Hoffman, who recently started his own channel and is very successful, doing a good job. If you're interested in nuggets, like 10 to 15 minutes, where somebody explains and gives you the basics and the details about what is a ransomware attack, what are the top 10 cybersecurity threats, really good resource to go and watch. So I would say go and have a look, subscribe and
definitely
like
good educational resource. Yeah.
Keep going, Yaniv, and doing a good job. So with that, also for us, hit that like button. I know, smash that like button and subscribe. Especially the like button, that will help the YouTube algorithm. We don't know how it works, but we know that likes are supposed to help. So hit the like button. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We are on Twitter. We are pretty much on several channels. People know how to find us. Also down below in the description, you will also find all the links towards the resources, the links and resources of what we talked about. So here's the complete list. So you see there's quite a few there, but everything we talked about you will find over there, and you can follow up. So thank you, Daniel. Thank you everyone for joining us and for watching us offline if you're watching offline. And I hope to see you soon in a next Threat Researchers Live. Bye-bye.
Thank you.